Hey, welcome everybody. We have people from Massachusetts and from around the country. In fact, prove that by putting in chat where you're tuning in from. I'm Kara Cohen. I'm with the state office for AARP Massachusetts, and we are offering this as part of our caregiving series. So you've joined a program on medication literacy, which is geared toward consumers, and you'll find some very consumer-friendly information is going to be shared tonight. And then next Thursday, we have a program also at the same time, also for caregivers, on the financial aspects of caregiving. The last Thursday in May, our focus is on ADUs and alternative housing for loved ones. ADUs can be for anybody, but in this case, we're making the case that it's good for when you're taking care of loved ones. So to learn about all this and everything else we've got going on, please visit our state website. That's aarp.org/MA. And I've not seen anybody enter anything into chat. Don't be shy. I will have to disable it. I think that happens every time. I'll hand over the microphone right now to one of the Jameses of today's program. You'll notice we have two Jameses by coincidence. James Lamastro is a volunteer with us, an advocacy volunteer who's helping us get the caregiver tax credit passed. And he wants to share his passion for this and why he thinks it's so important. And we think you will agree. So please, James, take it away.
Thank you very much. And I know to the 48, AARP and myself and everyone salutes the 48 million family caregivers that make possible care for older Americans. I myself have been a caregiver. My mother and father both lived with me, for my mother for 10 years and my father for 6 years. And we were able to support them in their older age and able to help them out in terms of their having a dignified and a good living. Well, part of what we're doing right now, especially in Massachusetts, we've hearings on it, and it seems to be moving along, is that we have pushed AARP and a number of advocacy groups a $1,500 tax credit for people who provide family caregivers. And myself, I would have found it useful to have that resources available to us. We could have provided some extra services to my parents while they're here. But I know a number of other circumstances where the family tax credit may be the difference between tax giver credit, maybe the difference in whether or not an elderly person who is living with another caregiver goes to a nursing home or not. Sometimes it's the simple matter of a modification to a house or some sort of expense that comes along that makes it difficult for people to take care of them. And while we don't see the tax credit as the panacea for most of us remaining in our homes, we do see it as one part of the whole process of keeping people at home. We see it as part of a general overall money following the person to their home so that the persons could stay in their home. So for those in Massachusetts, I would encourage you to write your local representative to keep the pressure on, both on the tax credit and also on the other legislation. There are probably 20 bills in front of the legislators. Many of them have got hearings on elderly care and improving the lives of elderly people, especially those who are vulnerable. So I would encourage you to keep the pressure on legislatures, because this seems to be the year that we might get it through. And for other people in other states, I would encourage you to contact us if you want to see what we're doing, and we can probably give you some model language and stuff like that to put your own in your own state. So I want to thank everybody again, and I think that's it.
Perfect. Thanks, James. The legislation is passed in some states already by the work that AARP has been instrumental in. So we're pushing this across with the work of most of our state offices in coordination with the national office team. And speaking of national office, James McSpadden comes to us today from the national office of AARP. He works with the AARP Public Policy Institute. The Public Policy Institute churns out a lot of research and a lot of information that's both for consumers and for practitioners. And James has something that he worked on that he talked to us back in January about, and I thought this would be great for you to all hear about. So medication literacy with great information tonight and to follow in the follow-up email. So James, please take it away.
Thanks, Kara. So good evening, everyone, or maybe early evening, seeing the locations that people are in the chat. But so as Kara said, I'm James McSpadden. I am with our national office. Our national office has what's called the Public Policy Institute inside of it. It's kind of an internal think tank that focuses on issues that matter to the 50 plus. We have a health team, which I'm a member of, and within the health team, there are a number of us that work on different issues. I work on prescription drug issues, and so have been busy in the last couple of years working on the Inflation Reduction Act and the provisions for Medicare negotiation and other things, but also have been very busy at working at the state level and supporting our state offices like AARP Massachusetts. Before I came to PPI, which is what we call the Public Policy Institute, I actually was in our government affairs team in our national office and did a lot of work to support our state offices, including California and Nevada and Massachusetts that are in the chat. So tonight, though, our topic is medication literacy. This is an issue that I brought to the team and said, you know, I'm really kind of interested in understanding how we can work on this medication literacy, which is really, by that, what I mean, and let me make sure I can advance slides. So what I mean by medication literacy is it's really just kind of a subset of health literacy, and we've probably all heard about health literacy. But what we mean by it are here kind of a couple of definitions. Health literacy is that broad term that means kind of the way in which we take in, process, and use information in our day-to-day health life and making those decisions. Well, medication literacy is really just a subset of it that focuses on how we use our medications. So here, the degree to which we obtain, comprehend, and process very specific information about medications to make those informed health decisions. I think this is a very important topic because older adults are involved in decision-making all the time, in medication decision-making all the time. There have been estimates that say as much as 80% of the treatments and the interactions we have with our practitioners involve some sort of medication. We know that older adults take prescription drugs more often than other populations. Here, 4.6 prescriptions a month is what the average the average Medicare beneficiary takes. And we also know that this is an important topic because limited literacy, kind of that idea of anything basic or below, is pretty high amongst older adults. Surprisingly, here's just a chart that shows you what I'm talking about. You'll look at the kind of bottom line, and it shows that 59% of older adults have basic or below basic health literacy. This is from a 2006 survey, so it's a little old, but what they found over time is it was the same. But more than half of people kind of struggle with their own understanding of how to make those medication decisions with the information that they're given. And then if we look, this slide also does a breakout by race and ethnicity, but and we'll have these available, but you can see that amongst Hispanic and Black older adults, the rates of basic or below basic are even higher. But so I'll get to kind of this kind of rounds out what I'm talking about here about medication literacy. It's really another way to think about it is whether a person has and can use the skills necessary to take medications appropriately. And this kind of lays out some of the skills. This is just kind of a sampling of the types of skills that we're talking about. I've broken them into 3 categories, but you don't have to. But anyway, you can see here, basic skills include things like reading your prescription drug label, comprehending those instructions for use that are either on the label or that come in the packet with every prescription, the ability to order refills. And then you get into another level of skills that are, how do I react to a medication problem when it occurs? You know, a lot of prescription drugs have warning labels on the side and say, if, you know, beware of this potential side effect or this outcome. What do you do when that happens? Another is to be able to take instructions in order. So if it's you need to eat food and then take this prescription, or you need to take these multiple steps in order to take the prescription, sometimes that can be more difficult for those with limited literacy. And then the final one is kind of integrative, this idea of what kind of strategies can I have? And we'll come back to this in a little bit, because I think this is a really important element for family caregivers for sure. So what we did is we have started developing this medication literacy series. We wrote one basic paper that said, okay, here's what the issue is, here's what we're looking at. And some of the information I presented a minute ago was from that. But then we said, you know, it's one thing to talk about the issue kind of broadly. It's another thing to talk about the issue with issues that actually pertain to individuals and to family caregivers. So we started looking at these specific kind of targeted areas where medication decision-making really happens pretty frequently. So you'll see here are the 4 on the left here. Here are the 4 issues that we've tackled between 2022 and 2023. Prescription drug container labels, generic drugs, medication management, and we'll be finalizing one on drug formularies very soon. So with these, we did kind of our traditional research-based work where in the Public Policy Institute, we're gathering data, we're analyzing it, we're putting it out. The audience for that is probably policymakers or other people who work in this field, but that wasn't satisfying enough on the issue of medication literacy. We really felt like we need to have something that's consumer facing, that is explaining these issues and actually hoping to advance medication literacy by just talking about them. So with each of these issues, we've developed a video to go along with it, a very short 3 to 4 minute video, and an infographic that kind of distills and makes clear all of the information that's in the fact sheet. And I'll give you a resource page at the end where you can find those if you're interested in learning more and sharing them. They're all public. So I'm going to walk through each of those 4 very quickly, just to kind of give you a sense of what we are talking about when we've talked about these topics. So prescription drug labels, I think we've all interacted with them. We felt like this was the one to come out of the gate with, because it is really the most visible piece of communication we have around a prescription. It has all of that important information on it. We look at it every day, or at least every week, every month, and to kind of gauge how we're taking that medication correctly. Just to kind of point out a couple of different reasons why we did this. 4 billion prescriptions are filled annually in the US, many of those by older adults. And then this interesting one at the end. There was a study a few years ago where some researchers at Northwestern looked at a bunch of prescription drug labels, and they found 53 different ways to say, take 1 tablet twice daily. So of course the information is going to be confusing if there are that many ways. So we thought, well, let's get to the bottom of this. This is a video that we're going to skip over now, but I'll give you a link to later. We started looking into it, and we found, oh, well, there are a lot of different ways to look at the prescription drug labels. all labels kind of start with this basic information, this federally required information that should be pretty familiar. If you looked at a prescription drug bottle, the prescriber, your doctor or nurse practitioner's name, the pharmacy's name and address, your name, or family member's name, date of birth, kind of those kind of basic things, when it was filled, what the statements are. But then states get to choose. They get to kind of just say, so we want these few things, and boards of pharmacy, go through a process and develop these, but they're all a little different. So here on the right are some of those things that states can choose to include. Some of them seem pretty intuitive, right? Like how many pills are in this bottle, if it's a bottle, how many fluid ounces are in it, if it's an oral suspension, what kind of warning labels and other information should I have? So states can choose those. And to kind of show you the difference, I looked at Massachusetts, and then I looked at a couple of other states, and all of the states are in our paper to kind of talk through what elements they've elected to choose. But Massachusetts is a pretty good example of a state that said, maybe the federal are okay. They actually don't have any additional regulations around required elements on a prescription drug label. Whereas New Hampshire adds the quantity of the drug, the name of the pharmacist, and other information on warnings. Connecticut, on the other hand, adds kind of minimal elements to the federal standard. They just add the quantity of the drug as well as the expiration date. So if you're going to go if you're going over the border to New Hampshire, which I know happens in Massachusetts, or into Connecticut, your label might look very different than your neighbor who got a prescription in Massachusetts. Or if you go to two different pharmacies, one in each state, you will also find that they're different. This is just a very poor resolution, but to give you an idea of how different prescription drug labels can look. Here you see there's some highlighted areas. They give a prescription number. They're not highlighted on every prescription label. Sometimes the font is bigger on one element than the other. The arrangement can be totally different. The font size can be very small and hard to read on certain bottles. So there's a wide variety, and because of that, there are attempts to try to make this more patient-friendly and to make it more standardized. So there's a group that has put this out, and we've kind of taken it to heart, and we put this together in our infographic. This is from that, to show that these are some of the elements that we should consider when designing a prescription drug formulary. Arrange it appropriately, limit unnecessary information, choose language carefully. If someone doesn't speak English, let's make sure we can offer a prescription label in that language, and make it readable and direct. So that's all some of the information that is there. And there's more information in our paper, and I'll direct you to that as well. Okay, so our second issue is generic drugs. I think most of us probably know what a generic drug is, either because we take one or we administer them on behalf of our family care, our loved one, if we're a family caregiver. But there are a lot of people who still have kind of strong feelings against generic drugs, despite their kind of universality. So brand name drugs are very well known. They're the ones that are splashed across all of our advertisements. Xarelto, Lyrica, Eliquis, Humira. I mean, we're familiar with those names. Generic don't have a name recognition, but they are the most common, and they're therapeutically equivalent. They are the same in dosage, safety, strength, quality, and efficiency. So they are in all respects equivalent to that brand name drug. They just don't have the name recognition. So this kind of shows the difference. Brand name drugs, they only make up 10% of prescriptions, but make up 80% of the spending. Generic drugs make up 90% of the prescriptions, but only 20% of the spending. So we're using a lot more generic drugs. They're costing us and the health system a lot less, whereas we're using very few brand name drugs, but they're costing the system a whole lot, and us a whole lot. Just to kind of give you kind of a little kind of a glossary of other terms that come up when we talk about generic drugs. You may have heard small molecule or chemical drugs. Those are, well, actually, I have that backwards now that I'm saying it out loud. So the brand name drugs are actually large molecule, but they're called biologic drugs. So biologic drugs are those that are made with living organisms, or sometimes specialty drugs you'll hear about. Whereas generic drugs, the kind of generic of biologic, are called biosimilar. So I just wanted to throw those out there, although it's confusing because I mixed up my slide. Apologies. So in the paper, we identify some barriers to generic drug utilization. Now, some people can't take a generic because of some health reason, that their physician or their nurse practitioner says, you know, this really won't be good. It won't interact with your other drugs. You shouldn't take it. And that's understandable. But there are a lot of older adults who still don't take generic drugs for some of these reasons. They may not be able to substitute, or there may not be a substitute naturally that happens in the state. There are a bunch of states that allow you to substitute, but some don't. Generic drug names, as I mentioned earlier, they are really confusing. And they are hard to recognize when you're looking at a label. And sometimes the label will list both the generic name and the brand name. And in some states and in others, they don't. And it makes it tricky to know exactly what you're taking, and it makes for some confusion. There are, as we talked about, large variation in drug labels, medication literacy, clearly a barrier, and biosimilars. There's a pretty low awareness of what those are and how they can function. And I won't get into it in this time, but just something to be aware of. All right, so the third area is medication management. And I think this probably has the most direct applicability to family caregivers, though they all have, they all are related to the decision-making that happens on a daily basis. But medication management is just that coordination of tasks required to safely and effectively take prescribed medications and over-the-counter medications. It's really important because, as we know, drugs need to be taken at the right time and in the right way. And so if literacy can be a barrier to doing either of those things, and can cause complications that result in hospitalization or some other problem down the line. So let me, so these are the four things that are involved in medication management. There's always someone doing something, right? It's either you, if you're caring for a loved one, it could be your loved one, and you, it could be your provider that's involved in this too, but there's a group of people that are involved in managing medication. There are goals that are always going to be set. Is it to reduce the number of drugs that are being taken? Is it to make sure that they're being taken at the right time? There's a process that can be set out, and this can be a formal one or an informal one. And there's always the drug list. There are the things that you, the list of those drugs that are being taken, and that will be a part of the medication management. All right, so here, with respect to caregivers, as I said, this is directly applicable. Just a few stats up here: 82% of family caregivers manage medications for a loved one. 44% perform this task multiple times a day, making the burden even higher. 23% find it difficult, have said it's difficult, and often they cite their fear of making a mistake or the need to provide constant attention while performing the task as being some of those big barriers. But the good news is that there are things that can help with all of this, right? No one's alone. These are some of the formal programs. I just want to say, some people qualify under Medicare for something called medication therapy management, or MTM. And this really is a good tool. It's under-enrolled. It's not well known, and not everyone in Medicare qualifies for it. So it's worth talking to your doctor or your or your nurse practitioner if you think you might be eligible. It's for people with 2 or 3 chronic conditions that take at least 2, but maybe 8 drugs, and have high medication costs above $4,900 a year. That's all going to change. It's actually going to be much lower. So soon more people will be able to qualify for it under a new Medicare rule. But there are some other things out there that you can look into, and these are also explained more in the paper. But in addition to formal programs, there are informal ones, right? Like most of us are in the business of using informal tools to be able to manage medication, pill boxes, phone apps, reminders on our calendars, these kind of simple things that help us make sure we take pills at the right time, at the right on the right day. There are other strategies that could be used with those tools or not, you know, involving a family member to come over and set up a pill box, for example, regular conversations with a provider, either during office hours or outside of it. So there are a number of things that can be done there. And then I want to close out this by saying it's important in all of this to recognize that this is, when we talk about medication literacy, we're not talking about a fault of a consumer. What we're talking about is the fault of the system to support the consumer. We live in a world where personal medication literacy is one thing, but the organizational or the system-wide medication literacy is another. And we really need the system to step up and to improve medication literacy in all of the communication and in the things that they put forward to consumers in order for us as consumers to be able to improve our own literacy. So I just want to make that clear. And here's some of the things we call for from researchers, insurers, providers, and policymakers. So direct you to the medication literacy page. We built an easy thing at AARP where you can land on it, look at all the videos, look at all the reports, all the infographics. It's all in one place. And we'll be putting out our medication management and the medication management comes out in a week or two, and the drug formulary will come out very soon thereafter. So I think I've run through very quickly all of them. I think that's it. Yeah.
This is great. So obviously the link that I put in there already, James, I took care of that.
Great.
It sounds like you're going to want to be bookmarking that and checking back for the updates. We do have a couple of questions. One is, with generic medication, will the pharmacist point out that it may not be the right alternative? And the person says, I thought that both generic and brand name were made up of the same components.
Yeah, that's right. And they are. And, you know, you should have 2 points, right? Where generics and brands are discussed, both with when the prescription is being prescribed. Hopefully that conversation happens with the provider where they say, you know, they can check a box to say this can be substituted, or they may not. But yes, the pharmacist also is the second point of contact, and they may say, hey, you know, this looks like it could be substituted. This is a state where that could happen. I can make it happen. Do you want to? But yeah, there shouldn't be a fear. If a provider feels like it really isn't the right drug, the generic over the brand, they are probably going to let you know that in the visit.
Good. And this is a simple question about pill packs. And generally, this person was asking, have people had good experiences with pill packs?
Yeah, pill packs can be another strategy or tool. I think it's a good one. We listed it as an example in the paper. There isn't as much research on it, but you know, just anecdotally, I know people have used them. I actually used them when I was a direct care provider in Washington, D.C., and they were really, really helpful. Yeah, so it's a, you know, some pharmacies don't do it anymore. They're sort of going away, and they're kind of farming it out to third parties if you want it. But yeah, it's worth exploring.
Okay, those were our 2 questions, and we have reached the midpoint anyway, the time to wrap up. So I hope this has been a good introduction. And James, I appreciate what you've shared with us, and obviously you're passionate about this, and we look forward to what more you're going to bring to us on this website. So please bookmark it. It will come to you in the email that I'm sending out to you tomorrow, along with the recording and the slides as well. And so there'll be a short survey. This was featured on the virtual community center. So that's why we have people from around the country. And so I would appreciate you taking that survey when I send it out tomorrow. And I hope that you have found this to be informative. Thanks so much, and have a good evening, everybody. Cheers.